Okay, so the idea of today, it's going to be a relatively short session in comparison to yesterday, which went on for about an hour. What I wanted to show you today is just the manner in which we can configure and then go on to manage Cloud PBX within the Office 365 portal. We mentioned yesterday how Skype for Business and Cloud PBX extends Skype for Business native functionality to be a complete telephone system. But unless you assign the relative PBX and calling licenses to users, even if you have a 365 subscription, you won't see the relevant options for assigning numbers, calling plans, those types of things in the GUI. You could take out an E5 trial, which I'll remind you about at the end, which will unlock some of those features for you for a limited amount of time. But really, you need to kind of see a tenant that has those licenses enabled so that you can just see how things are presented to you and how you go about configuring everything. So this is actually my own tenant, which I'm going to sign into now on the screen. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Office 365 portal, you can find this easily enough in Google. A large majority of people already have Office 365 subscriptions. And you can sign up to Office 365, and as soon as you've done that, regardless of whether you purchase any licenses or not, you'll be able to sign into the portal, which I'm doing now. Sorry, your sign-in timed out. And it will take you to the Office 365 portal itself. So what I'm very wary of today is kind of getting sidetracked into Office 365 as a whole product and a set of services and kind of being sidetracked into Office 365 management. So I'll really try and stay focused on the Cloud PBX stuff and how we go about configuring that. And if I stray, then I apologize in advance. So this is the 365 portal. When we're configuring and setting up our Cloud PBX, we need to go to the administration side of things. And in here, you may or may not already have users populated in your own tenant. If you open up and subscribe to a new Office 365 tenancy, then you won't have any users. And because this is my own tenant, I mentioned before, this is my private one. I have only got just myself in here and an admin account. But when you're interested in subscribing for Cloud PBX services with Pstn Calling, it's much the same as giving a 365 user any other permissions or services like Exchange email, SharePoint functionality, those types of things. You need to assign licenses to users. I've gone ahead in advance and picked this user, Ben Donaldson, which is myself, and assigned the licenses on the right-hand side of the screen there. I've given him Skype for Business Online Plan 2, which gives him the soft client, the Skype for Business soft client for his desktop. I've given him a Cloud PBX license, which gives him the ability to use Skype for Business as a phone system and gives him the call forwarding, call hold, transfer, those types of functionality. And then finally, I've given him a PSTN domestic calling plan, which means he can call local and national numbers. If you recall yesterday, those of you that were in on that webinar, we covered various different license scenarios, and we mentioned how that if you're already an E3 or E4 or E5 subscriber, then some of these licenses might be included in that subscription plan. So you would only then need to purchase the outstanding licenses. Notice here either I don't have an Exchange Online Plan 2 license assigned, and I would require that for voicemail services if I wanted this user to have voicemail functionality as well. The only reason I don't have that, if I'm honest, is because it's my private tenant. I pay for it out of my own pocket, and those licenses come in there for me at about £19 a month. But that's a phone system for me right there, other than the voicemail. Voicemail would be another £6 a month, and that would take me up to £25 a month. I mentioned yesterday, if your education or charity framework, your licensing might be significantly reduced. Okay, but the whole licensing scenario is definitely something worth having a conversation with a partner about. There are many ways you can cut it, and it'll be different scenarios. We'll have different best fit solutions, if you like, regarding licensing. So that's a user that I've created in the Office 365 portal, and I've given him those licenses which I've purchased. If we jump across before we go into the Skype for Business configuration side of things, and we look at the subscriptions that I've got, we will see those licenses broken down. So here you can see on the left-hand side, and I'll try and move slowly because I appreciate there's probably a bit of lag regarding my screen feed. You can see the 3 licenses that we just alluded to that have been assigned to that user: Skype for Business Cloud PBX, Skype for Business Online Plan 2 and the PSTN Domestic Calling Package. Some of the licenses that I haven't assigned, like PSTN Conferencing, consumption billing that we talked about yesterday as well, I haven't purchased those. Those are add-ons, and add-ons are specific to particular subscriptions. So for example, if I pick Cloud PBX on the left-hand side and then expand add-ons and click buy add-ons, this will tell me what add-ons are available for the Cloud PBX subscription. Just come up completely blank. There we go. So the add-ons for Cloud PBX, I've already got PSTN Domestic Calling, which gives me the ability to make local and national calls. So that says purchased, obviously. But if I wanted to upgrade to an international calling tariff as well, then I have that option here. And we talked about PSTN consumption, whereby you can dip into a pot of money to make calls that are outside your PSTN calling service. Well, that's also purchased here as well. So those add-ons that haven't got applied, you would purchase those as add-ons through the relevant subscription. If I select the next option down, Skype for Business Online Plan 2, and see what add-ons are available for that option, we'll see different add-ons in here. So on the previous screen, we had things to do with calling, essentially, providing a pot of money or an allowance for calling tariffs. In here, we've got a slightly different option. You can see again, I've already purchased a Skype for Business Cloud PBX, but in here I have the option to add a conferencing add-on. We mentioned yesterday that a conferencing add-on is required for users that will be scheduling conferences and sending out meeting invites. When a user sends out a meeting invite, by default, it just has a hyperlink on it that someone can click to join a conference. Someone who has the Skype PSTN conferencing license assigned to them, when they send out a meeting invite, it will also have a dial-in access number available on it, so people can dial in to the conference through a mobile phone or landline. So once again, I don't have that currently assigned. If I wanted to, I'd need to come into this subscription service, look at the add-ons for this subscription service, and purchase it. And then the final option on the right isn't really relevant for Cloud PBX with Microsoft PSTN Calling. This is more relevant if you're using on-premises PSTN connectivity. Once again, yesterday we referenced the two SKUs that you can have Skype for Business Cloud PBX with. One was pure PBX in the cloud with Microsoft PSTN connectivity, and that's what we talked about in that session, and that's what we're kind of extending on today. The other option was Cloud PBX with on-premises PSTN connectivity, where you use on-premises hardware to connect your Cloud PBX to your local ISDN connection. If you're to do that, then you need to buy a plus cal for each of those users, because as it says there, that unlocks or allows users to take advantage of Skype for Business software client in regards to telephony features, putting people on hold, transfers, hold music, those types of things. It's not relevant in the scenario we talked about yesterday. If you're completely in the cloud solution with Cloud PBX and Microsoft PSTN Calling, there's no requirement to purchase this option here. Okay. And then finally, the third option, the add-ons that are available under domestic PSTN calling. There's not actually anything new under this one. We get a repeat add-in that we already looked at under the first subscription, which was the consumption billing. And I talked about that under the first subscription. And the consumption billing, once again, is the safety net where you can buy a pot of money to have your users be able to make international calls if they ordinarily couldn't, or to continue calling if you exceed your monthly minute allowance. So those are the licenses subscriptions. Like I mentioned, you can cut it in a number of different ways, and the add-ons available will vary from user to user. How you go about purchasing those add-ons is by finding them under the relevant subscription. So while we're in here then, I just want to take a look at PSTN consumption billing. I haven't got that assigned to my user at the moment. There's not actually a cost involved with this license. There is a cost involved in putting money in the pot in the first instance. If I go ahead and click Buy Now, this will take me to a purchasing page whereby it will help me configure consumption billing for my Skype for Business Cloud PBX users. And just as a reminder, consumption billing is a safety net. When you buy your PSTN dialing plans, you get a certain amount of either domestic or international minutes per month per user. Those minutes are then pooled at the tenant level, and then those total amount of minutes, that's what your organization can make in terms of outbound calling. In the event that you exceed that, your business would come to a grinding halt, and you'd obviously, that wouldn't be very smooth in terms of business functionality and output. So we have consumption billing, which is a safety net, a pot of money, which will start to be consumed if you find yourself in that scenario, and it's consumed at a calling rate card that's published by Microsoft per landline or mobile to various countries. So that's the idea of consumption billing again, and this is how we would go about configuring it. This information is populated based on what you already have in your tenancy, so I didn't need to type any of that in. And when you click next, you find yourself being queried about how much you'd like to deposit in your consumption billing pot. How much cover do you want to apply to your users? You can do a one-time deposit, which we talked about yesterday again, or you can do an auto recharge method whereby a regular consistent amount is deposited into your tenancy when you reach a certain threshold. By default, if I just selected now to purchase the settings as they are on the screen, this would deposit £10 into my consumption billing tenancy. And if I found myself in the scenario that I alluded to earlier, and we ran out of minutes, or we needed to make international calls for users that didn't have that privilege, then it would start to eat into this £10. But when that £10 is gone, we've hit that hard ceiling again, and calls would come to a grinding halt. So the preferred option is to actually use an auto recharge method, which has two defined values. The value with which you want to deposit into the pot. So I might change the initial deposit to be £100, and I might say every time we get down to £20, make another automatic recharge deposit of £100. Please enter whole number. Okay. And in that scenario, you've given yourself an always-on, if you like, calling platform. Yes, you might get to the end of the month and your auto recharge may well have kicked in 9, 10, 11 times, but the onus is very much on the user and the tenancy owner to at least have an idea or monitor the amount of outbound calls and calling minutes that are taking place, and indeed the level of currency in the consumption billing pot consistently throughout the course of that month. And then you can obviously adjust that in following months. Consumption billing itself can be enabled or disabled on a per user basis. So I mentioned yesterday again how you might only enable key stakeholders, executives, or business critical areas of the organization itself for consumption billing. And Joe Bloggs, the desktop worker up in Office B on floor 9, perhaps he wouldn't need to be enabled for Skype for Business consumption billing. Okay, and it's as simple as that. Once you've clicked submit and you've purchased that, back where we were looking at my user at the beginning, and we've assigned those 3 licenses, there will be the option there to assign a consumption billing license as well. And I said the license itself doesn't have any cost incurred with it. Okay. I can't see the IM screen, by the way, guys. So if you do have, because I'm presenting, but if you do have a question, throw it in there, and I'll review them all at the end, and then I'll just quickly answer them for you if that's okay. And if I need to come back in and show something, then I will. That's not a problem. Okay, but that's consumption billing, and that's really all there is to look at from the administration center itself. Everything else now is within the Skype for Business admin control panel. Get to that through admin centers at the bottom and Skype for Business. So at that point, we really just use the Skype for Business portal itself, sorry, the 365 portal itself, to assign licenses to users, make sure we acquire the correct number of licenses and disseminate those accordingly. Once that's done and the licensing assignment is done, everything else then is going to be done in the Skype for Business admin center. If you have an existing Office 365 subscription that includes Skype for Business, then you'll be able to come in here yourself already at the moment. But your options that you have on the left-hand side may well be different. As soon as you start to use Cloud PBX licenses and assign PSTN calling plans, you gain a voice tab and you gain a reports tab. Without those licenses, these 2 options aren't visible. So if you're using Skype for Business just for instant messaging and presence, you wouldn't see these because you don't have the voice functionality enabled. They come with the PBX licensing. Once again, we assigned Ben Donaldson the license for Cloud PBX and a number of other licenses. And so automatically he appears in here as a Skype for Business user because he's enabled for Skype for Business. Under the voice section, we can see that I've already assigned him a number. How did I get that number? Again, yesterday we mentioned that there are two options available with number provisioning. You can either acquire numbers new from Microsoft, or you can go through the number porting process whereby you take the telephone numbers that your organization currently has and you move them over to Microsoft, and they're owned by Microsoft at that point. In this case, I've simply assigned a number that Microsoft has given me to Ben Donaldson, the user. And it says there I have 10 licenses available. The wording's slightly quirky. What that really means is I have 10 additional numbers available. If I choose to acquire those numbers, then I can. If I want to change Ben's number, I can. If I had 10 more users and I needed those each users to have numbers, then I have 10 numbers available to me. I mentioned yesterday again, there is a rule which is 10% plus 1 add 10 in terms of, or 10% plus 10 in terms of how many numbers are available to you. So if you had 10 users, 10% of 10 is another 1, so that's 11, and then add 10 gives you 21 numbers. So for 10 users enabled for Cloud PBX with a Pstn calling plan, you'd get 21 numbers. In this case, there's just me, just one user, yet I've still got 11 numbers available. That's because, once again, 10% of 1 is still going to be, unfortunately, 1, but then add 10 gives me 11. So Microsoft gives me 11 numbers. I've got 10 remaining and I've assigned 1. If I wanted to, you imagine there's perhaps another 10 users there and they all need numbers. To acquire new numbers from Microsoft, it's simply a case of selecting get new user numbers to assign to individuals, as it states there. And then we'll be prompted with the screen that's going to query our geographic region, our country, and the area in which we're in. And it will give us the option to choose the dialing codes, if you like, for particular areas of the UK. Now, I'm in Exeter at the moment, and you'll see that Exeter isn't actually listed as an area, so I couldn't get an 01392 number at this time. I could get, the closest I could get was Plymouth, which was 01752. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I went ahead and selected a London number, an 0203 number anyway, which might be feasible for you if you want to appear as a larger, more mainstream organisation that's London-based as opposed to North Wales or somewhere. Select United Kingdom from the left. The region will change to city, and then this is what's currently available in Office 365. These will be extended as time goes on. I mentioned that Exeter isn't in here. There was a Plymouth number, I think, which I could get, 01752, so that's about 40 miles away from me. But you could, I don't know, pick an 0203 number for London-based. So the amount of user numbers I can acquire now is 10. It said that on the screen, on the previous screen that we were on. How many am I after? Well, let's just say I actually want to get 10. And it's going to reach into the Microsoft pool now. It's going to pull out 10 numbers from that region code. It doesn't show you them by default. If you click Show Numbers, it will. And these are the numbers that it's pulled back for me. They're not always in a consistent block, as you can see. I guess it's not practical for Microsoft to kind of do it that way. They try to keep things as tidy as possible and give you blocks where they can, but that's just not the nature. When people are taking out 1 and 2 numbers here and there and giving numbers back, the pool becomes quite fragmented. These numbers, I think, are held for about 10 minutes, at which point after that, if you tried to click acquire numbers after 10 minutes, it would inform you that they've already gone back into the pool and you'd need to go through and request them again. But if I click acquire numbers, the changes have been saved. Those numbers are mine now in my tenancy to assign to users. So I mentioned yesterday that the number provisioning process, if you're acquiring new numbers from Microsoft, is extremely rapid. And you can see that at just a few short clicks, I've gone ahead and I've got 10 geographic numbers now, London-based, that I can assign to users. And as soon as those users signed in, they'll be able to receive calls on those numbers. There is a slight time lapse. You're not going to assign this to a user and they're going to be able to take calls straight away. I think I did this perhaps when I did my test one, which I've assigned and taken off a few times now. It's taken 2 to 3 hours before the number actually functioned and that end user's phone would start ringing, or their Skype for Business client would start ringing, and they could make outbound calls as well. You can see it says unassigned next to all these numbers. So at the moment, I purely own them. I haven't assigned them to any users. But as you can imagine, the assigning process is quite straightforward. You select any given number, click assign, and you'll be able to search for users that have been enabled for Cloud PBX with a Pstn Calling plan. I don't have anyone else in my tenancy, but if there are other users there, I could search for them and assign them that user, that number rather. Something else of note is the emergency address that's listed underneath. This needs to be assigned on a per user basis when you assign a number. I'll look at this shortly because you can see in the background there on the faded screen, the fourth option along on the tabs there is emergency locations. But you saw how easy it was for me to grab a number there from any geographic region and assign it to a user. So I've assigned a London number to someone who feasibly works out of an Exeter office. So as you can imagine, the time-old way of telling where somebody is based on their calling number isn't accurate anymore. And if emergency services were to see an 020 number and start preempting their movement towards the London area, they'd be going in the wrong direction essentially. So when you assign a user number, regardless of what format or postcode or dialing prefix is in that number, you will need to assign an emergency location, thereby giving people like emergency services a true representation of where you are geographically, so that when they do preempt things like emergency calls out, they're at least heading in the right direction. So I'm not going to assign this number because I don't have a user to assign it to, but please take away the fact that the emergency location is fairly critical. It won't let you assign a number without one. If you have multiple branch offices, then you're going to have different locations that you'll need to assign people, and you can simply create those here in the emergency locations. And then when you're assigning numbers like we were on the previous screen, those emergency locations are available for allocation. So you need to go through and just make sure that you assign the correct location to each user as and when you're assigning a number. I'm going to go ahead and give these numbers back because I don't actually need them. I'll keep the number that's currently assigned to my user. You can see on the right, click delete, yes, and the numbers go back into the Microsoft pool, and I'm free to go ahead now and just click go and get more numbers, and once again it's a rinse and repeat process. So it is really rapid provisioning when you're taking new numbers from Microsoft. The more common scenario is going to be a number port, because I've already talked about it. You might have public facing numbers, you'll have websites, you'll have published literature that will have contact numbers on. Those numbers are going to be with your existing carrier. So it's perhaps more feasible to take those numbers from your existing carrier and carry out what's called a number port, and you move those numbers to Microsoft, and that's done through a port order. In America, in the US, you can go ahead and do that through this GUI. At this time in the UK, you have to manually raise a service request or support ticket with Microsoft by clicking the link. There's no hardship. In some ways, it's better because you don't get any input from Microsoft customer services or assistance. There's no Q&A session if you're using the web interface to do it. If you open a service request to do this, then you get a response from the customer service agent, and it's a good opportunity for us in the UK to ask any questions that we might have regarding the number port in terms of time frames, which can be up to 30 days, information that you'll need, such as your account number with your existing provider, those types of things. It's just nice to have someone to query and just keep tabs on the number port process. Regardless of which method you use, once you've submitted a port order, you'll be able to come back into this screen and see the status of that port order, and that's updated hourly by Microsoft just to let you know how they're getting on. And typically you'd schedule that for a weekend so that your numbers get dropped in here out of hours. You might work over a weekend, so bad example, but at least out of business hours, and then you'd go ahead and those numbers would appear in this list as the Microsoft provisioned ones did, ready for allocation. And then finally in here, your voice users tab will once again just show the numbers, the users that have been assigned numbers, gives you an overview of those users, and it's just a friendly way to see what emergency location they've got, change their number or remove it if you want to, and that would drop it back in the phone numbers pot for reassignment. And it tells you if they've been assigned licenses and Pstn connectivity, etc. So this is just more, once you've got users populated in here, This is a friendly output, if you like, or a nice GUI to see everything at large. And that's all there is really to assigning telephone numbers and enabling people for Cloud PBX. Once you've gone through those actions, you have essentially made someone publicly available on the PSTN, and they should, provided that they've got the correct licenses, be able to do everything that you can on a normal desk phone within a normal PBX. Dialing conferencing license, I haven't assigned, so we won't see in here. But in the same vein, if you assign someone, I mentioned it before, a dialing conferencing license, then when they send out a conference invitation, they will have a DDI on that conferencing invite that people can dial to join into that conference. The other relevant point for voice-enabled users is the reports. This is where, as an administrator or management of any kind, you can see the calls that have been made to and from your Cloud PBX environment. Naturally, most of mine were just tests done earlier on this month, mostly to the speaking clock and an inbound test from my own mobile to my number as well. But this allows you to export this type of information to Excel, where you can easily sort that information, gain further analysis on where you've incurred costs, where your consumption billing might have been used, for example. So there's no charge on any of these because I've been calling landlines and mobile phones in the UK. And my calling plan allows me to have 1,200 minutes of that at any point. If I was to exceed that 1,200 minutes, then you'd start to see a charge incurred here, and it would come out of my consumption billing. It's quite straightforward. I'm just getting a bit of feedback, guys, in my ear. 1 second. Okay, yep, that's better. Yep, so as a trail of thought lost. So as I was saying, this is a friendly interface which allows you to see all your call analytics at a glance. This is all that's currently available in terms of inbound and outbound call details. But Microsoft have been developing and also released in preview some very friendly GUIs that show you real-time call analytics, etc. That's from I think they purchased code from a company called Event Zero that are very, very big in Microsoft Link and Skype for Business call analytics, and they've used that code to actually develop their own output. And sessions going on at Microsoft Ignite at the moment, they're previewing all that call analytics output, which looks really good. It's real time. It allows you to see in much more detail what's going on in your calling environment rather than just an Excel type output such as this. Although this is perhaps as much as most people need anyway, unless you're looking for details to kind of justify return on investment and those types of things. Users blocked, something as an administrator, if you need to block particular phone numbers, then you can go ahead and do that, and they remain persistent into here until such time that somebody removes a detail. And this session details tab here, I haven't actually seen before because it's only recently appeared, and you can see there it says it's in preview. So that's something that I'll need to have a look at in due course as well. But those are your current reporting details and what you've got in terms of output. So you'll know yourselves whether you need more output and return on detail than what's currently in there. And all your user administration and enablement is done in the Voice tab. Everything else is not unique to Voice and is available to you if you decide to take out a subscription or trial tenancy, which includes Skype for Business and doesn't even have any Cloud PBX licensing involved. On trial licenses, I've exhausted all mine, I think. But if you haven't already done so and you'd like to see more about what's available to you in Skype for Business Office 365, or 365 in general, then it's definitely worth taking a look, signing up to a tenancy, signing in, and coming to the subscriptions tab, and just taking a look to see what's available to you under the Add Subscription section. In here, most things, or a large majority of them, are available for trial for up to 30 days. So you could take out an E5 trial for 30 days that will give you almost all the functionality that's required to have a look at what we've just looked at there. The only thing that's missing from an E5 trial is a PSTN calling plan. We touched on that yesterday. But you can see I don't have a trial option here because I already used it and I actually went through and used trials for everything I could pretty much. But definitely come in here and take a look. It'll allow you to have a play yourselves. There's nothing to stop you setting up users, even creating directory synchronization between your on-premise Active Directory and a trial tenancy, just to have a play. And indeed, if you after 30 days you're still deep in exploring what's available to you and doing the cost analysis, you can actually request it to be extended for another 30. So you can get up to 60 days free E5 licensing. So definitely worth doing if required. And the final thing I'll mention is all this administration that we've talked about thus far in terms of Cloud PBX and indeed the Office 365 stuff as well can be done through remote PowerShell. So if you need to do things en masse, if you think, oh, I've got 400 users, I don't fancy sitting there and clicking through assigning licenses to 400 users, then through remote PowerShell and Excel CSV files, we can bulk enable users for Cloud PBX and associated licenses in a non-time consuming manner, if you like. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give everyone an overview and more food for thought, much like yesterday, but an overview of how simple and quick it is, especially if you're taking your numbers from Microsoft, just how quick it is to provision users, even in a trial or pilot scenario, and get people up and running. Many times, and it existed with messaging and Exchange when everyone started moving to Exchange Online, people are often wary of how things are going to perform over a WAN or an internet connection. But hopefully through things like trial tenancies and stuff like that, and how quickly it is to provision users, getting it up and running is very quick, and then getting users to use it as well isn't any great hardship. So, and because of the speed in which you can do that, I definitely encourage people to go away and have a play, because it helps to dispel any fears or misconceptions that currently exist regarding WAN connected services such as Cloud PBX over the WAN delivered through 365. I'm just going to minimize this so I can see if anyone's asked any questions, which are a couple. Call recording functions available. It's a good question. There's not currently any call recording functionality available for recording PSTN calls. I imagine that that functionality just isn't available yet, but may well be on the roadmap. And secondly, there are a few legalities, obviously, around recording people that call into your organization. I don't know the details, but obviously you're obliged to let people know that they're recording. That functionality would also have to be introduced to any call recording service that might be there. We have things like auto-attendant functionality and IVRs on the roadmap for later this year coming to Cloud PBX. I can't see. Microsoft are pushing this extremely hard. So things like call recording solutions and even contact center solutions I can see coming down the line, and I expect to see them on a long-term roadmap probably at the end of this year. But as it stands at the moment, in answer to your question, there's no call recording functionality available in Cloud PBX.